take refuge in the Buddha. I take refuge in the Dharma.
I take refuge in the Dharma.
I take refuge in the Sangha.
I take refuge in the Sangha.
You can the palms join. Palms down. Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
Welcome to the Dharma Bum Temple. Hopefully that's where you intended to be at this moment. Otherwise, you're in the wrong place. You know, there's around kind of the Buddhist world, meditation, we talk about being present. And there's often this resistance to the present moment. And when you look at the heart of the Buddhist teachings, it's learning to be with things as they are. And there's often a struggle to be with things as they are. And it is actually that struggle that causes that conflict in your mind and in your hearts. There are plenty of seats up here, so please don't go all the way to the back. Sorry to embarrass you. And you don't have to sit with your friends, but you're welcome to. They're nice people. There's often this difficulty we have at learning to be with things as they are. And our entire life is filled with moments that are incredibly uncomfortable. Right? At this point in time, if you showed up here on a Saturday morning at 11 o'clock, you're pretty well aware of that already. That our life is filled with moments that are uncomfortable. And to me, the practice of learning to be present with things as they are is not trying to tell yourself, I wish it was different, or I want it to be different, or why isn't it different? Because in your mind and in your heart, as you're sitting there telling yourself, I wish it was different, I want it to be different, why isn't it different? You're actually missing the opportunity to be with something as it is. One of the names of the Buddha Tathagata means suchness, things as they are. And, you know, as we get into a meditation practice here and you ponder during that time, whatever you ponder, and you go throughout your day, just notice how much resistance you have to the moments that you're in. And if you're resisting the moment that you're in, then you're not even in that moment. You're not even experiencing what is happening. You're too busy fighting it, resisting it, and hoping and wanting it to be other than what it is. And so for me as a Zen practitioner, it's always been about becoming really connected to things as they are. And that's difficult. How many of you love everything in your life right now? I don't see one hand, and I know most of you, you're not that shy. Okay? So the practice isn't about loving everything in your life right now. The practice is about being with everything in your life right now. If you try to trick yourself and convince yourself that you're just going to love each moment, nonsense. It's not going to happen that way. There's so many moments in our lives that we're just going to not enjoy. And the struggle, again, coming back to dukkha, what the Buddha called suffering, coming back to that is the struggle is wanting things to be different from how they are. The struggle is not the thing itself, and this is a really key point. The struggle is not the thing itself. The struggle is your resistance to whatever that thing is and wanting to change it. And again, when we want to change it, we're not actually learning to be with it. So learn to be with the things in your life that make you uncomfortable, and then you can actually experience life as it is. But most of us want life to go according to whose plans? How many of you want life to go the way you want it to? There we go. I just want to make sure your arms were working today. That's how we want. That's what we want. We want our life to go the way we want it to. Surrender to that as soon as possible, and you'll enjoy your life much more. So, with that being said, we'll start a meditation practice since that's what's advertised and that's what everybody typically shows up for, the peace and quiet. A couple things to tell you before we begin. Nothing's going to happen to you. You're not going to float away. You're not going to have any mystical, magical experiences, most likely. Anyone's mind race all day long, just thinking and thinking and thinking, right? Your mind's not going to shut off. Especially if you're new to meditation. Some of you, this may be your first time here or first time doing a meditation. You will not think nothing. Often people think that meditation is about thinking nothing or going blank. You end up telling yourself, think nothing, think nothing, think nothing, and that's a waste of time. Okay? Don't judge your practice. We judge everything. What we look like, what we wear, what we eat. We're constantly in these judgment modes. And the practice of meditation is learning to go beyond judgment and just abide in sensation of breath, things as they are. All right? Posture. If you're on the cushions, often it helps slide into the front third. Pushing the stomach forward allows back to straighten. If you're on the benches or chairs, also just sitting up straight, stomach pushed forward, shoulders are relaxed. Hands can be on the knees or in the lap, whatever's comfortable. If you need to move during meditation, simply move. Movement doesn't make you a bad meditator. It just means you have an itch. Just don't sit there for 7 minutes wondering if it's okay to scratch yourself, right? Just scratch yourself, put your hand back down. All right? I'll guide us as we begin. We'll settle into a little bit of silence. We'll be done in about 3 hours. Just kidding, don't worry. And starting with the eyes closed, if comfortable, or slightly open. Mouth is open or closed. Start with taking 3 deep breaths, slowly. And eventually, settle into a natural rhythm of the breath. Noticing the mind as it wanders, jumping from thought to thought. Start with gently guiding the attention, focus to the stomach or chest. Breathing in, feel them rise. Breathing out, they fall. going to continue this practice, observing sensation of breath, expecting nothing but to sit and breathe. As the mind wanders, lost in thought, recognize it. Release that thought, returning attention, focus to the breath. Keeping the mind alert, aware of each sound, each thought, each physical sensation. Yet concerned with nothing but sitting, breathing. Letting go of expectations. Letting go of judgments from the practice. Just sitting, breathing. Where's your mind? Return attention, focus to the breath. Breathing in, follow breath in. Breathing out, follow breath out. And with the body still, rested, and the speech quiet, aware of all sounds, and the mind learning to settle. Know what it's like to just sit and breathe. Knowing with each breath, there's nothing else to do. Nowhere else to go. And no one else to be. Everything beautiful, exactly as it is. Sitting, breathing. And once again, taking 3 deep breaths, slowly. And as you slowly open the eyes, slowly begin to move. The most important practice of meditation is to recognize how you feel now, immediately after. Compare this to how you typically feel throughout your day. Recognize the difference, if there is one. Ask yourselves how you prefer to feel every day for the rest of your life. And realize however you feel now, if it's quiet, calm, still, or a busy mind, racing mind, whatever you're sitting with at this moment, has nothing to do with anything I said. It's nothing to do with how we sit the hands across the legs. It's nothing to do with the sounds around us or anything else for that matter. It's everything to do with your own mind and your own mind's reaction to an external condition. This is what the Buddha called pratitya samuppada, means dependent origination. This is the basis of the Buddha's awakening. The word Buddha simply means awakened. He was a human being no different than anyone in this room who began to understand why he suffered, why he got angry, sad, depressed, stressed, anxious. He began to understand the causal relationship of all phenomena. And what that means, very simply, for all of us in this room, regardless of where you come from or what you believe in or where you think you're going, your whole life is filled with things that happen, and you react. More stuff happens, more reactions. That's what we get every day. This practice is learning what it's like to respond to something quietly, peacefully, still. Because for most of us, the way you responded to the last 20 minutes is quite different from how you respond to everything else that's happening throughout your day. And all we're working on is closing the gap to where the way you feel now is closer to how you feel always. Just as driven, motivated, productive, successful, whatever that means to you in your respective lives. But with a mind that's steady, clear, focused, distracted by nothing, disturbed by no one. Imagine going a day without being disturbed by someone. Most of you won't even make it home before you're disturbed by someone. This practice is not easy. It's not necessarily fun. Training the mind to be present is probably the most difficult thing you'll ever train in your entire life. But it's also the most important. Taking care of mental, emotional health and well-being is the foundation of everything you do. Family, friends, work, relationships, strangers, customer service people, both ends of that. Meditation is free. Buddhist practice is free. It's sitting, breathing, learning to be kind to yourself and everybody else you encounter every moment of your life. It's not that complicated. For some reason, we like to complicate things. Sit, breathe, learn to be still, learn to be present, become aware of what you think and what you say and what you do. And learn from that, listen to that, pay attention to that, be aware of that. And then be nice to yourself and everybody else. I mean, really, folks, you just have to go be nice to people. Is it that difficult? I know it is. I get it. If everyone was just nice to us, it would be a lot easier. I mean, one, we'd run out of excuses of why we can't be nice to people, first of all. Learning to be with things as they are is, as I started talking about at the beginning, that's why we do a meditation practice. It's why we cultivate the practice of sitting and breathing and being with things as they are. Once we stop trying to change, fix, control, manipulate everything and everyone around us, which is where we spend so much of our time, hoping they do this, hoping they do that, wishing they would do this, wishing they would do that. So much time focused on everybody else's stuff. This is taking care of your own mess, as I like to say. Everybody else has their own mess. This practice is learning to be with yours. Now, when we sit for 20 minutes, you have pleasant thoughts, you have unpleasant thoughts, and you have neutral thoughts. But with all of them, unless I missed it, everyone in this room had, I don't know, probably around 38,000 thoughts in the last 20 minutes. And you know what you did with them? Take a wild guess. What did you do with all the thoughts you just had for the last 20 minutes? Because nobody sat there and focused on the breath for 20 minutes. I used to be a betting man, and I would bet everything I've ever owned on that. What did you do with the last 20 minutes with your thoughts?
Nothing.
Nothing. Nothing. Now, when you're not inside these temple walls or any other religious, spiritual place you go to and you have thoughts, what do you do with them?
All kinds of crazy things.
All kinds of crazy things. So let's keep this going. What is usually more productive and beneficial for the life of yourself and those around you? Doing nothing with your thoughts or all kinds of crazy things with your thoughts? Which usually works out better? Nothing. Right? And that's the crazy thing, is often we think meditation is this tool that's supposed to get us somewhere or bring us something or do something. And I look at it as the complete opposite. It's really the practice of just sitting and being and doing nothing. Now, clearly, you're not going to spend your entire life sitting and being and doing nothing. That's not the purpose. Right? But that's not what happens. But learning to do nothing at times is incredibly important. Very often, not always, it's kind of tricky the way I say this, right? Very often, when we do nothing, we don't harm others. Unless somebody we know and love is asking us to do something and we're just going to be mean and say, I'm doing nothing, then we are harming them. So it's not so clear to say doing nothing harms no one. But very often, right? What's that one Dalai Lama quote? He says something to the effect of, life is about learning to be kind, and if you can't be kind, at least don't harm others. Something to that effect. Right? And so coming back to one of the reasons why we cultivate a practice of sitting or meditation, could be sitting, standing, walking, or lying down, as the Buddha taught, right? Because when we're doing a meditation practice and we're just sitting and viewing things as they are, then we're not wrapped up in the emotional response. So for 20 minutes, your pleasant thoughts, you didn't scream and yell and celebrate them. Your unpleasant thoughts, you didn't kick and scream and cry and complain. And the neutral thoughts, I don't know what you did with those, but those are just there. So you just proved to everyone in this room and yourself that you can have pleasant thoughts, unpleasant thoughts, and neutral thoughts for 20 minutes and bring no harm to others. Congratulations. Okay. Now just replicate that every other moment of your entire life and you'll be great. So I think I'll stop there. And as always, I prefer just to open up to questions, meditation, Buddhist practice, anything that's on your mind. And we use the rest of the time to address that and go from there. So, questions, thoughts? Yeah.
If karma is action
Yeah.
and meditation is non-action, do we gain merit by doing meditation?
Great question. So if meditation is action, or if karma is action, and I'm repeating what you said so I make sure I understand it correctly. You said if karma is action and meditation is non-action, do we gain merit from doing meditation? Is that your question? Okay, let's take this step by step and break it down. Karma, mainly for others who maybe have not heard it said this way, karma is action, right? Often we think karma is what goes around comes around. We think, I have good karma, I have bad karma. If I do good, I'm going to get good. If I do bad, I'm going to get bad. Or most often, the way we use it in Western cultures, we say, their karma is going to get them, right? It's really the most misunderstood word in a Western culture is the word karma. Karma is not what you get. Karma is what you give. So this idea of karma is going to get them is nonsense. Their karma is going to get somebody else. Right? So let me expand on that a little bit for those who don't understand this. The Buddha taught we generate karma 3 ways: body, speech, mind, what we think, what we say, and what we do. So karma is not what goes around comes around. Karma is what we give. Right? Anyone play pool? Shot pool, right? You hit the cue ball into the rack. You hit the cue ball into the rack. Balls go in a different direction every single time, right? Yeah. Our entire life, we are that cue ball. Every time that cue ball hits the rack, the balls go in different directions. And the entire game continues that way. Well, our life is that. We are that cue ball. And every person, place, and thing that we encounter, we have an impact on. So it's the law of cause and effect is another way to look at karma. It's not what comes back to us. Now, we like to think that if we do good, that good will come back. But it doesn't always work that way. We like to think that, if someone does bad, that they're going to get bad. But it doesn't work that way either. Karma is what we give. So we give kindness, we give compassion, we give love, we give caring, we give patience. We give a lot of things, okay? Karma is action, not what we get, but what we give. So the question of if karma is action and meditation is non-action, this is the fun part. I just had to get us to step 2. Meditation is not non-action. Meditation is action. It's just action different from what we tend to think action is. All right? So my action is sitting. My action is breathing. My action is not running. Those are my actions. Sitting, breathing is an action. Now, in sitting and breathing, I'm probably not bringing anyone harm. Unless somebody's yelling at me to get up and clean my room. And I just sit there and breathe and ignore them. Then that action is bringing harm. So meditation is absolutely action. Just different from how we might perceive it to be. The third question, the third part of your question is, do we then gain merit from meditation? And this idea of merit, just to touch on it briefly, is in most schools of Buddhism, but some very specifically, there's this idea that we, when we think good thoughts, we speak good words, we do good deeds, and we have kind of, for lack of better words, good karma, that we cultivate merit. That as we give, we get. And as we get, we give more. And as we give more, we get more. Now, you're not doing good deeds in hope that you get things. Kind of defeats the whole purpose. And I know that's not the point of the question. That's just for anybody else who thinks that, you go do a bunch of stuff, you're going to keep getting stuff. And that's the reason you do it. If that's your intention, it won't work that way at all. Right? But this idea of merit and do we accrue merit from meditation depends on what your meditation practice is. Depends on where your mind's at. Right? So if I'm sitting and breathing and I'm silent, I'm not with my words hurting anyone, right? If I'm sitting and breathing and I'm still, I'm not with my body physically harming anyone. But then what are we left with? That one darn thing that just ruins everything. Our thinking, our mind, really our thoughts. So the real question is, Jim, when you sit and do a meditation practice, are you cultivating merit? And the only one who can answer that is you. Because then it comes down to, what am I thinking during meditation? Now, again, we'd love to be at a place where, as Dogen called it, to go beyond thinking, where you abide in sensation of breath. Dogen, the great Zen master, 1253, founder of Soto Zen School of Buddhism. And he would say, just abide in sensation of breath. And as I quickly joked about earlier, how many of you sat for 20 minutes and did nothing but focus on sensation of breath? You thought about lunch. You thought about what you did this morning. You thought about what happened to you when you were 7 years old. You thought about your laundry. You thought about God knows what, right? For 20 minutes. And maybe you attempted to come back to breath, and then you started thinking again, and then you started wandering, and then you're all over the place, and then you're thinking, I wish you would just hit the bell already, because I want to move, right? Who knows what you thought? So for 20 minutes, you can ask yourself, where was your mind? And that's why I always say, where's your mind? Because I'm pretty certain when I say, where's your mind? It ain't on your breath. Right? Yeah. So I think a good way to look at it is, you've heard me say this, but as my master always said, Jeff, instead of asking questions, look at the questions you have, continue to practice, and begin to shift the question. So then the question could be, how can I cultivate merit when I'm sitting and breathing? And how am I not? Other questions? I saw, yeah, go ahead right here, and then we'll go to the back. Yeah. No, not you yet. The first one here. Yes, you. I can hardly see any of you, but yeah.
I enjoyed your introduction.
Thanks.
It was something useful to me, hopefully, challenging too. And when I was doing my meditation, I was focusing on my breath, and experienced a lot of gratitude for the clean air that I was able to breathe. And then I thought, what if the air I was breathing when I was trying to meditate was poison? And how could I be peaceful in that?
Mm-hmm.
And it brought me back to what you were saying earlier, at some points in my life. And I wondered what you would say to that.
Yeah, it's meditation can be and is often a very emotional experience. Before I even address what you're specifically asking about, I just want to touch on this because it's what I'm sitting with.
It wasn't emotional. It wasn't emotional. I was only thinking, what if I was in a space where the air I was breathing.
Right. Okay, that's fine, but I'm still going to continue with the fact that meditation, the fact that you're crying right now tells me that you had an emotional experience.
Before. Yesterday.
Okay, right. So what I'm getting at is meditation brings you to the present moment, ideally. And in that present moment can become, maybe not for you, but for others, can become very emotional because we become to sit with what is or what we want or what and how things could be. And that can be very emotional, and that can be very positive, and that can be very negative, that can be very painful, that can be very pleasant, right? The Buddha taught very clearly that there's pleasant, unpleasant, and neutral. And we have aversion to things, and we run from them, and we run towards what we crave and desire. So when I hear you ask the question about having gratitude for breathing clean air, and then pondering what it would be like to be breathing poisonous air, right? I have no idea what that's like. But what I'm hearing from you is it's very difficult. Now, the question is not to answer. This is just my response. I have no answers. I just have responses, right? The question for you to ask yourself is, why would your mind go to that? And what is it about that that moves you so much? And then the next question I would ask myself is, what am I doing with my life to have an impact on the world around me? And explore that. There's something there. I can't answer anybody's personal questions. It's not my role.
What I meant is, how can I meditate in your presence? How can I?
Very well. Life is filled with pain. Life is filled with poison. The Buddha died from poison. Not that that means anything other than the fact that life is filled with poison. If you want to know directly how can you meditate with pain, the same way you meditate with everything else. You sit with it. If you want to try to run from the thoughts you have, that's not really beneficial. Breathing in, I feel pleasure. Breathing out, I feel pain. Breathing in, I feel pain. Breathing out, I feel pleasure. What I'm getting at is, which I don't think I'm getting through to you very well, is that it's not about running from or towards anything. When we are in pain, be with the pain. That's what life is filled with. It's also filled with beauty and joy and wonderful things. But most of us don't spend our lives sitting and pondering all of the wonderful, beautiful things. And I was glad to hear you say in your initial question about gratitude is that you're grateful to be able to breathe clean, pure air. Absolutely. We take that for granted. Right? There are people right now who can't breathe. Or they're breathing and it's not clean air. And it's killing them. So what I would ask myself again, in a little bit of a different way, is as I'm going to go through my day today, why am I going to complain about anything? Why am I going to complain about the way my hair looks and what shirt I'm wearing and what food I'm eating and what traffic jam I'm in and what these people are telling me? Why am I going to complain to anyone about anything when I should simply come back and just be grateful that I'm alive and breathing clean air? Because a lot of people in the world can't and don't do that. So I would just rest in tremendous amounts of gratitude. But But I still think there's, like I said, and ain't got time to get into this now, but there's something a lot deeper there. Paying attention to what your mind wanders to is important. There's much deeper things going on very often with that I can't answer for you. But that's a pretty heavy thought to have your mind wander to, and I would explore that. What's going on there? Yeah. In the back of the hand. Yeah.
So I just had a question about the self and its relation to karma. So if there is no self, there's only awareness. What is awareness's relation to karma?
So your question for our billion YouTube viewers at home who didn't hear that is, what is the relationship between non-self and karma and awareness? That's kind of what you're getting at, right? How new are you to Buddhist practice?
Fairly new.
Fairly new. So you read one book that was talking about non-self.
Yeah.
Correct.
I've also had experiences of non-self.
I have not. So you keep those for you. I have no idea what it's like to be non-self. Right? I'm too much wrapped up in myself and my ego and my pride. I'm glad you know what non-self is like, but let's slow down a little bit, okay? So non-self, everything in Buddhist teachings, and that's the danger, is you read one book, right? I've been at this long enough to know some dude new to Buddhism reads a book and they're like, oh, non-self, ultimate awareness, going beyond the sensation of self. That's enlightenment. That's nirvana. That's what I want. Who is it that wants that, and who is it that's asking that question? The self. Who is it that thinks they're aware of this experience they had of non-self? The self. So you didn't have any experiences of non-self. If you did, you wouldn't have been aware of it and you wouldn't be asking the question. I just want to make this real easy for you so you don't read another book and think that all of a sudden you're going to enter into nirvana after 4 Buddhist books. Okay? Making sense so far? Good. I'm glad it's wonderful, right? This practice is about cutting through the ego and pride that we have. So anytime, I wanted to kind of bring us back to like an even playing field here, right? Just to cut through that part. Now we look at non-self, which is a huge Buddhist teaching. Incredibly important, right? The Buddha said ultimately there is no self, right? That's what he was saying. Now, when I read and begin to try to understand and comprehend what the Buddhist teachings are about non-self, it's to understand that first and foremost, without getting too far into this, at the time of the Buddha in India 2,500 years ago, everybody believed in reincarnation or rebirth. They were Hindu. They believed that there was an endless continuation, life after life, that what was called a Laya Vijnana, storehouse consciousness, that something would continue on. Okay? What the Buddha was saying, different from the Hindu belief that he grew up in, is that the Hindus said that there was a soul, like there was an inherent self that continued, that I, Jeff, was going to be reborn and that Jeff was going to continue. And the Buddha said, no, there is no concrete inherent self. There's just an accumulation of karma, of actions, of everything I do. That alive is not that storehouse consciousness that will be continued. But when this physical form dies and that consciousness continues, it's not Jeff that's continuing. Just like it's not Jeff that's sitting here. You might call me Jeff. Well, you probably didn't know. You don't know me, but my name is Jeff. So now you would call me Jeff, right? But that doesn't make me Jeff. That just means that's the name you call me. What does Jeff mean? There's lots of Jeffs out there. We're not all the same, thank God, right? It's just a name. I'm born, my parents were like, oh, we'll call him Jeff. So everyone's like, Jeff, Jeff, Jeff. There are these things called fingers pointing at me, Jeff, Jeff, Jeff. And one day I'm like, oh, my name is Jeff. And then people call Jeff and I respond to Jeff. And then I build Jeff around an identity. Jeff has these parents and Jeff grew up in this family and Jeff lives in this town and Jeff went to this school and Jeff has these friends and Jeff has these whatever. And I start creating this identity and this ego that is Jeff. And I spend my whole life trying to defend it and prove it and win it and be better at it. The Buddha is saying all of that is an illusion. It's just a story in your head you're telling yourself. And you have to be very careful with this because, right, here's my arm. Very often people make the mistake that think, non-self means you're not real, you're not there. You are there, you're just different from how you and everybody else perceives you to be. So if I chop my arm off and claim non-self, you know what I'm still going to be left with? A lot of pain. Right? Make sense so far? So last thing I'll say on that with non-self is very often with questions along these lines. You know, when someone says, how do I know what ultimate wisdom is? I don't say anything about wisdom, but I can talk for 12 hours on what ignorance is. Right? You ever done anything really ignorant or harmful to somebody? Yes. So we know what that is. So ultimate wisdom would be to stop doing those things. So the same thing with self. Instead of looking at what is non-self, right? Look at what is your self. What's your name?
Abdel.
Say again, it came.
Abdel.
Abdel. So Abdel has a story, right? You come from a family, just like I do, and you have a story about who Abdel is. And each day you play out that story. Begin to watch how attached you are to that story, to the ego, to what clothes you're wearing, what shoes, you put on, the clothes, the cars you drive, the places you go to. Pay attention to how wrapped up you are in that story of the self, Abdel the self. And the further you move away from that story, the closer you get to non-self. But my suggestion is to never, I don't wake up one day and think like, am I going to abide in non-self today? Right? So is that helpful?
Very much.
Yes. And I know I kind of crack down on keep reading books. But be very careful that as you read them, especially early on in Buddhism, it will shatter your world and it will make no sense and it'll confuse you and it could potentially make things challenging at first. Because all of them are telling you to go beyond your ego and be nice to people. How long have you been doing that route?
I'm not sure.
Okay. So just pay attention to that stuff. Thank you. Yeah, I see a hand there. Yes.
So there's situations, I was reminded by what this person was sharing, where what's coming up might be very painful or traumatic, and I'm thinking that to stay with it at times is wise,
Mm-hmm.
but other times maybe not to take care of oneself.
Yes. Correct. 100%. I would agree. And it's very important to me. This is where discernment comes in. Right? Often around Buddhist circles, they talk about, non-self, non-judgment, things like that. But begin to recognize if there's a hot stove and I touch it and it burns my hand, I should hopefully have the discernment, recognition, and wisdom to know that being in the present moment doesn't mean that I forget that that stove burned my hand. Right? I should stop touching the hot burning stove. But I should understand that each time I have an action, law, cause, and effect, something comes out of that. And back to your question is that, yes, when thoughts arise, if we can be with the unpleasant, okay. If we don't want to be with the unpleasant, okay. But ultimately, if you look at what the Buddha was teaching, he said when you're breathing in and taking a short breath, know you're breathing in, taking a short breath, breathing out, taking a long breath, know you're taking a long breath. Recognize that, and ultimately, it's not about being with pleasant or unpleasant thoughts. It's going beyond all of the thoughts whatsoever. I'm not saying that I have any idea what that's like, but that's my technical understanding of the teachings. Because when we have experiences in our mind, I've worked for 20 plus years, people with trauma, traumatic brain injury, in and out of prisons, you name it. I've seen just about everything possible. People have murdered, raped, you name it, all that kind of stuff on both sides. I've worked in some heavy environments. And yes, sometimes it is extremely unhealthy for, say a combat veteran to come back and sit in silence for 5 minutes, because you know what they're left with for 5 minutes? Horror. And I in no way am suggesting that one should sit with that. But I believe that it is beneficial to slowly begin to be with those thoughts, because that's what's there. Right? So it's a balance. But yes, thank you for pointing that out. Yeah.
You answered it just in that last portion. I was trying to get clear on, it sounded like it's very important to sit with, for me, it's loss and grief.
Mm-hmm.
Yet, it's very painful. So how do I determine how much is help? When you say you basically need, in the beginning, you said you need to sit with this. You don't want to run away from it.
Mm-hmm. I mean, you can try, this is more for everybody else too, you can try to run away from it, but it's just going to follow you. wherever you go, there you are, right? My favorite Xenix, one of them is to a worm in horseradish, the world is horseradish, right? So you could fly half around the world, sit on a mountaintop in Nepal, and if you're an angry, pissed off person here, you just spend a lot of money to go all the way around the world, sit on a mountaintop and be an angry, pissed off person, right? So there is no answer. You can tell yourself how long is comfortable and safe and healthy. To sit with pain and discomfort mentally, emotionally, for 2 or 3 minutes, maybe okay. For 2 or 3 hours, go watch some cartoons, right? But yes, if you're always running from it, you're always going to be running from it. And what this path has taught me more than anything in the world is to stop running from what is. And what is that you have pain and loss in your life. And some days you're going to want to sit with that, and some days you're going to want to run like crazy. Both wonderful. We're only human, And again, it's kind of, don't believe everything you read. We read a book about, being with death, with loss, and we think, oh, okay, now I got it. No. They're just words on a page. That's not the heart. The heart will tell you what you can be with and what you can't. Yeah. So do one more question before we wrap up. Send you all out there to be nice to people. Go ahead, one more.
Me?
Yeah. You just read a book. You got like 70,000 questions. Shoot, one more quick and then we'll wrap up.
So, I have a lot of problems with the idea of the settle. And I had a very scary experience with psychedelics, and since that time, it's always haunted me, and I have a lot of trouble with that concept.
Yes. Simple answer or response. Don't do psychedelics. Nice to meet you. I'm glad you're here. Yes. So those are church bells, which means I got to stop. Saved by the bell. But in all seriousness, yes, don't do psychedelics. Obviously, it caused you a very bad experience, so I'd stay far away from those. And recognize that, yes, you had a bad experience and might have been, pretty scary. Have you also had beautiful experiences in your life?
Yeah.
Try to think about those more often. Those will get you through. The bad experience is what got you here. But the good experiences will keep you going. Helpful? All right. Just say no. We'll join palms. May the benefit of this practice be shared with all beings in all directions. May all be at peace. May all be free from suffering. May any merit gained from this practice be transferred to those who need it most.